Welcome to the Economic Development Council of Okaloosa County's Vision of Progress. I'm your host, Nathan Sparks, and today we're talking about transportation, obviously a foundational element of economic development. We're very pleased to have here in our studio Mr. Jim Wood. Many of you know Jim as a Destin City Councilman. Many of you may not be aware of Jim's role as chairman of our Transportation Planning Organization, our TPO. Some of you may not even be aware that we have a TPO. So Jim, tell us a little bit about that and what the TPO's role is.
Sure. Let me start by saying, when you get on city council, sometimes you don't know the other jobs you're going to get involved in, whether they're local, regional, or statewide. I happen to pick transportation. Okay. And the TPO is a federally mandated planning organization. For mine, it's Okaloosa-Walton. I've been on it for 5 years, been the chairman the last 3 years. Okay. This year, actually, there's another organization called the Northwest Florida Regional TPO, which serves all 4 counties in Northwest Florida. And I was selected to be chairman of that this year. Okay. And in July, I will be the vice chairman of the state MPOAC, which is a state governor's advisory transportation board. Wow. So I'm looking forward to lots of transportation hats and see what I can do. Well, looking forward to it.
That's wonderful, and congratulations on that. That speaks well of you.
Thank you.
Well, obviously transportation is an important foundational aspect of economic development, but I know there's far more than that involved in evaluating projects for our future growth in this community. So talk to us a little bit about the process that the TPO uses as you're evaluating projects and looking at future opportunities related to transportation planning.
Sure. Well, as I mentioned, the TPO is a federally mandated process. We do a long-range planning process. In fact, this little document right here, this is our long-range plan. It goes out to 2035. Okay. We try to look about 25 years into the future, and our new plan for 2040 will start here in a couple of years. Sure. It is a long range. It's comprehensive. The TPO is all about public access. The actual TPO board is made up of elected officials from the area, 11 municipalities of our 2 counties. And we meet 6 to 7 times a year. I see. Those are all announced in the paper. You mentioned economic development. Right. There are lots of things that we look at when you're looking at let's say, a road project. And economic development is one of those things. But as we talked the other day, there's some other things, and they all tie back to economic development, whether it's quality of life, capacity, congestion, safety. I may look at those terms, but in economic development terms, if you don't have all those things, are you going to economically develop? Probably not. So they're all interrelated. Right. So you have your way of looking, I have my way, we meet in the middle, and we get a consensus. Right. One of the TPO's jobs is to build consensus on projects. We prioritize projects first through our long-range plan, and then we also have annual priority lists that we do each year, and those feed into the Florida Department of Transportation, what they call their 5-year work plan. Right. And once those get on there and on the state transportation improvement plan, then projects get funded and get built. So that's one of my big goals, is we do the prioritize, define funding, get public consensus, and ultimately put projects on the road. Understood. And we've been pretty successful over the years since I've been here. Excellent, excellent.
Well, you mentioned the Florida Department of Transportation. Right. We were fortunate, of course, to have Secretary Ananth Prasad, the DOT Secretary for Florida, in the community not long ago as a keynote speaker at our Economic Development Council Roundtable Forum, a forum that you participated in as a panelist, and we appreciate that, by the way.
Thank you.
Secretary Prasad talked about the importance of the TPO process and talked about the importance of developing consensus on local transportation projects. It was clear that Secretary Prasad was giving our community a message that, obviously transportation dollars, even though we're now fortunately facing an environment where transportation is being given a lot of priority at our state. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, we just passed a budget that included $10.1 billion, billion with a B, correct, for transportation, which is phenomenal. But nonetheless, it's a competitive process. And we have to ensure that we have consensus in order to achieve success with those projects. Is that the message you heard from Secretary Prasad?
Yes, that was one of about 3 or 4 things that I picked up on. Right. Of course, the $10.1 billion, I guess, is the biggest transportation budget Florida's had in the history of Florida.
In history, right.
As I understand. Right. And that's good. And it's funny that we're talking about the biggest budget, because overall, transportation dollars have dwindled over the years because of how that paying is done. It's usually gas tax.
Right.
And gas tax over the years, unfortunately, is going down for numerous reasons.
Vehicles are becoming more efficient.
There you go.
Right.
Alternative fuels being used.
Right.
Just the buying power of the dollar, as a lot of our taxes are not indexed to inflation.
Right.
So as things happen, your dollar buying value doesn't go up. And in fact, on the MPOAC that I sit on, we did a revenue study about 2 years ago. And that was looking at it going back to about the year 2000. We've lost about $20 billion in buying power. And how do we make up that $20 billion? We had a series of things we recommended to the legislature. Unfortunately, when you look at the list, they all start with the word tax or fee.
Right.
In reality, or in the flow, or if you're going to start with the word tax or fee, you're probably not going to go very far.
No.
So it's kind of reality, kind of slaps you in the face, and you have to deal with what you have with the dollars you have in your hand.
Right.
So, and that's always a challenge to properly prioritize based on those scarce resources.
Sure, sure. Well, on the point of the consensus, I think that we've seen a recent example that, from my vantage point, not being directly involved, but being one who lent a letter of support, the Highway 98 widening proposal. Talk to us about that and your experience in working with that process.
Yeah, that's probably the best process outside of just the pure TPO things that I normally do. I was contacted by a local business organization that was interested in widening 98 from Airport Road in Destin to Tango Mar in South Walton County, just to the south of Silver Sands Mall.
Sure.
Part of that's already 6-lane, gets a lot of traffic, a lot of congestion, and it was already a #1 project on one of my priority lists. So it was in the right place to do something.
Okay.
Now, sometimes being on the list is not good enough. Having the public or local business backing helps do something.
Sure.
And in this case, the Howard Group was very interested in this issue. I was too, so it was kind of a good marriage. They wanted me to help from the TPO perspective, and we got the TPO resolution done. The Howard Group went out and coordinated for lots of other resolutions from things like the EDCs and chambers and counties and local municipalities.
Right.
And when you put all those together with other local letters of business support from businesses along the route of march, and you put all that into a legislator's hands or Secretary Prasad's hands, those are things they want to see, that we're trying to build public consensus.
Right.
And those, getting money early. This project was supposed to be funded in the middle to late 2020s, and it's only 2014, so we're a little early.
Sure.
The last letter I saw signed by Senator Gates, we're talking about should we get the funding, and I believe it'll be here, that FDOT has said they can start probably in 2018. So we're talking 6 to 8 years early.
Right.
That's good.
Absolutely. That is progress.
Unfortunately, sometimes in our area, the only option you have is to put lanes on the road. There are other ways you can move your body, whether it's transit, bikes, walking, but in this case, we have what we have. Highway 98 is kind of limited, so you got to put some lanes on the ground, and we're going to try to make it happen.
Excellent, excellent. Well, that was certainly a good process to witness, and it's clear that that's the type of thing, to your point, that the decision makers take note of.
Absolutely, and that was one thing that was clear from listening to Secretary Prasad during his talk at the roundtable last week. He talked about the budget, he talked about public consensus,
right,
the importance of the TPO, and he talked about the Brooks Bridge, which I think we're going to get to here in a few minutes.
Exactly.
That'll be another interesting process that'll go on.
Absolutely, absolutely. A very timely topic, the Brooks Bridge. And in fact, why don't we cut to some footage and allow our audience to view some of what Secretary Prasad had to say about the Brooks Bridge.
Very good.
All
Thank
right.
you.
We'll be right back. Please enjoy this footage from the recent EDC roundtable focused on transportation in the new economy. Let's hear what Secretary Ananth Prasad from the Florida Department of Transportation had to say about the Brooks Bridge process. We'll be right back.
Investments. We'll talk to you a little bit about a couple of your projects here. I happened to go over our famous Brooks Bridge over here yesterday. Wondered about that bridge. As you know, we're doing a project development and environmental study for the replacement of the Brooks Bridge. Here's a little bit of a news flash to you. That bridge has to be replaced. Okay, so let's get over that fact. Okay, so at some point, either if it doesn't get replaced, I'm going to have to shut down the bridge. Still ways out, but I cannot, from my professional conscience allow a bridge to stay open if it's unsafe. So the bridge got to be replaced. This is where the community needs to come together and figure out what that replaced bridge is going to look like. Every decision has its pros and cons about it. There's thought about building a second bridge. There's people for and against, thanks to Facebook and Twitter, and you can get lit up like crazy. All great, good debate, but at some point over the next couple of years, we've got to come with a community vision for what that bridge is going to look like. Whether it's a four-lane structure, whether it's a six-lane structure, whether it's a second bridge, all of those going to have to. I cannot decide that. The DOT in Tallahassee can't decide that, nor our headquarters for District 3 in Chipley can't decide that. It has to be decided by folks here locally, because you're going to be using the bridge. And whatever decision you're going to make, you're going to have to live with it for the next 60 to 70 years. Bridges now that we build are bridges, we build bridges now to last 80 years, okay? So this bridge is going to be here with you, like it or not. I probably won't be around as long as that new bridge is going to be. But the reality is this community is going to be with that bridge for decades to come. So it's very important that we collectively come together with the vision of what needs to be done. There's obviously challenges with all of that. Funding obviously is going to be a challenge. The way the department funds bridges is bridge replacement comes out of a dedicated pot of money, because obviously we're a peninsula. We have a lot of water bodies. We got a lot of bridges, so we dedicate a significant amount of money towards bridge replacements every year. The result of that, Angela mentioned that we have the best infrastructure in the state of Florida. We have the least number of structurally deficient bridges in the country, bar none. So think about it. We're in a very extremely aggressive environment, saltwater, corrosive environment, ocean, winds. Think about the number of bridges we have and the crossing. So the state of Florida for decades have made investments and made sure that we're investing our bridges. So we have a dedicated source of funding to replace our aging bridges and replace those. Now, when you need to build a new bridge, that competes against every other need in the state. Everybody, there's a lot of needs. Obviously, our budget is the highest, but it's going to compete against a lot of those things. And if you think about it, why would, I went to, 2 years ago, we went to Jacksonville, and there was a project that we want to get built, and people having this whole big debate about whether we should build this project or not build. And my message to the Jacksonville, North Florida TPO was, you need to tell me, you need to pass a resolution, you're either going to support this or I'm going to take the money and go somewhere else. Because the needs far exceeds the revenues and the resources that I have. So it's very important, whatever your result is, whatever your end result is, you need to come as a community, figure out. All of you are part of the economic development vision for this county. Well, transportation is a very big part of it. So let's work together. You have our commitment. That's why when there was a lot of debate about studying the second bridge option, we included the second bridge in the study. We're going to study all options, but at the end of the day, we will look to the local TPO, MPO, and the local elected officials to tell us which way to go. But key point, again, I want to lay out to you is that Brooks Bridge will have to be replaced. It's 48 years old. It's still structurally sound, but it doesn't have, as you know, it's very narrow lanes. It doesn't have any shoulders, so it's built to an old standard. We regularly conduct bridge inspections, and our goal is to continue to keep the bridge in a safe condition. But when we talk about economic development, transportation, need for good infrastructure, I think you all got yourself a good test case here to see how much do you all really believe in transportation and economic development, because this is about as fundamental as motherhood and apple pie when it comes to transportation and economic development. It crosses, it supports this area, so it's important that all of you come together as a vision, create that vision, that what you want to see this area look like for the next 50 years. And I can tell you we're going to be very much committed in kind of delivering that vision to you.
I'm Kelly Wines from the Okaloosa County Commission. I appreciate you being here. There's been a lot of discussion, this is in regard to the Brooks Bridge, about new engineering standards and requirements about height and angle of incline and such as that. I'm curious, and I think a lot of people are there any exemptions or variances within that could be employed to keep the somewhat the same footprint, or could you speak to that, please?
Yeah, a good question. Yes, we can get exemptions, and we will seek those. And I'm confident that we will be able to get those exemptions to keep it within the footprint of the existing bridge. It may go a little bit, but the height, there's a navigational clearance, so we got to meet that. But we can go a little steeper, and we can do stuff to fit it in. So that's, and you don't need congressional help on that. We can do that. Congress doesn't do a lot of good stuff. They're not engineers. But you have our commitment to make sure we try to be as compact and minimize the impacts as much as we can to the surrounding area.
Welcome back to the EDC's Vision of Progress. We're talking with Jim Wood, Destin City Councilman and Chairman of the Okaloosa-Walton Transportation Planning Organization. You've just seen some footage from the recent EDC roundtable where Secretary Ananth Prasad from the Florida Department of Transportation shared some interesting views concerning the future of the Brooks Bridge. Jim, certainly some interesting thoughts from Secretary Prasad there regarding the Brooks Bridge.
Absolutely. You know, it was clear that he said the bridge is going to get replaced.
Right.
I mean, normally bridges have a shelf life.
Right.
He's talking now about bridges being built to last about 80 years. So one of the things he stresses is public consensus. Because
Right.
once you get this thing built, you're stuck with it for about 80 years. So
Right.
you want to get it right.
Right.
So, you know, getting the public involved, getting the business community involved through workshops, public meetings, there's going to be lots of time to do these kind of things. I mean, the study, what they call the PD&E study itself was just approved by my TPO at our last meeting. That's about $6 million, give or take, lasting about 3 to 5 years. So it's going to be an involved process.
Sure.
As we go through that, there will be going to be lots of opportunities for workshops, public forums, meetings. And I've already talked to Commission Chairman Wines. He wants to do some things, and I'm amenable to get together and try to start laying the groundwork for some public consensus. There's been lots of studies over the years on the Brooks Bridge, different options, and my own talks with some FDOT engineers. I think they're looking for about 6 lanes of crossing, whether that's one bridge, a combination of 2 things. I think that's one of the options that will be on the table is how you put that together. So it'll be interesting to see. There's been, I think, a Hollywood option, a Wright Boulevard, a Wright Parkway option.
Right. A second bridge option.
Correct. Mm-hmm. And of course, always the issue of the Brooks Bridge itself and how high is it, how long is it, how much does it affect downtown Fort Walton Beach.
Right.
And that's something we'll have to work through all those issues. And what kind of waivers can you put in place for bridge heights and bridge lengths, and some of those are FDOT, some of those are Coast Guard issues.
Right.
So it's going to be an involved process, but you know, we do have time to get this done, so we don't have to do a hoop jump tomorrow.
Right.
But a good, solid public consensus campaign for folks like the EDC, the Fort Walton Chamber, the County Commission, and folks on either side that are going to be affected by the transportation getting involved in the process. So
Absolutely.
I'm looking forward to it. So.
Absolutely, as are we. You mentioned County Commission Chairman Kelly Wines.
Right.
He asked, at the close, he asked Secretary Prasad a question concerning that potential Brooks Bridge footprint, the replacement bridge footprint. And it was interesting, his question, as you recall, was geared toward, is it possible, theoretical, to have a future bridge, a replacement bridge, in the same footprint of the current bridge, which was something that, many of us had been led to believe wasn't possible. But because of, the new requirements regarding, obviously shoulders and things of that sort. What was interesting was Secretary Prasad's response that there can be waivers and exemptions granted that could result in that footprint remaining largely the same. That was interesting. What did you have to think about that?
Well, I thought that was interesting too. I mean, I had heard the comments the concerns about the length of the bridge,
Right.
bypassing parts of downtown Fort Walton Beach. I can see that. That's a huge economic issue for Fort Walton Beach.
Absolutely.
Can it be done in the existing footprint? Secretary Prasad is an engineer, so I will trust his judgment, but there will be lots of engineering information that will be put out during the study and the design work. I think the jury is probably still out on that, but there are waivers that are out there. I can't rattle off all the lists, but
Sure.
I know there's some out there, and I'm sure we're going to work to find those and put the appropriate ones in place.
Right.
So, there's going to be a process here. It's not willy-nilly.
Right.
We got a lot of good folks involved in the process, and smart people are going to figure this out.
Right.
So I wouldn't be overly concerned. We do have time to do this, and I'd say, there's going to be a process. Let the process play out. Serve your role in the process, and let's get this done.
Outstanding. I agree. So, we've talked a lot about citizen involvement, Jim,
Right.
and I know that's a critical component of any transportation planning
Absolutely.
initiative. Talk to our audience a little bit about how they can get involved in the process, not just related to Brooks Bridge, but
Right.
in general, transportation planning requires good citizen input, input from folks that are in various capacities, be it businesses, be it private citizens, be it political officials. How do folks get involved?
Well, let me tell you, my main goal as chairman of the TPO or the regional or anything else is to increase public and business leader participation in the planning process.
Right.
That's one thing that I really, to me, is lacking in the area. Not that it's that bad, it's just not there all the time.
Could be better.
I want it consistent.
Right.
Consistency is a big deal. Predictability and consistency are big deals in any planning, but more so transportation because of the cost of things. Our meetings are open to the public. In fact, the TPO is actually made up of three things. The TPO Elected Officials Board that I serve on, there's actually a thing called the Technical Coordinating Committee, the TCC, which is our city staff folks. They meet before the TPO.
Okay.
And then I have a Citizens Advisory Committee.
Right.
And they meet before the TCC. And we all basically follow the same agenda, so I get the recommendations on the TPO from the previous two meetings. So there is a citizens board, and anybody can volunteer. So if you're interested in being on a citizens transportation planning board, you can go to the West Florida Regional Planning Council website at wfrpc.org and look up the CAC, and you can submit an application, and we'll consider and approve it and put you on the CAC.
How often do those positions open?
We've actually done two recently.
Okay.
Now, there's never enough because enough folks don't volunteer. So
Okay.
there's always chances to serve.
Sure.
The other thing is that I'd like to point out is transportation planning actually starts in your local community, whether it's a city or a county. When your city or county does their budget, part of that process is the capital improvement plan.
Right.
And that's where you'll find your transportation projects at the local level. So that's the first place actually to get involved at, because my desire as the TPO chairman is to have my projects bubble up from that list. So we're consistent through the process.
Right.
So you can get involved locally when your town is doing roads, sidewalks, bike lanes, whatever it might be. And that all plays into an overall multimodal system. What I'm supposed to be putting on the ground is multimodal.
Right.
So, each municipality or county that participates and does their part, the maximum citizen involvement, to me, helps that go on.
Right.
All the meetings are always open to the public. Bring your good constructive ideas.
Right.
I became a blog reader a couple of years ago. One of the worst decisions I ever made. Some folks don't like a lot of things.
Right.
Coming to me and saying I don't like something doesn't help me a whole lot. A constructive comment helps.
Offer a solution.
Absolutely.
Right.
If you got a problem, bring a solution along too.
Absolutely.
So there you go.
Absolutely.
So, I encourage you to come to meetings. We don't always get a lot of public participation in our TPOs. I'd love to have a whole lot more folks show up.
Right.
We actually had a workshop back in January for the Highway 98 that we talked about earlier. And I had a concern about utility folks. There's some big utility issues in doing that widening project.
Sure.
And we put out a call. I did a special workshop as a TPO chairman. I can call those. And I think every utility company showed up. FDOT showed up. Some folks in the public showed up. And we had a good discussion on utility impacts. So, it's not always about making decisions. Sometimes just about education and furthering the communication process.
Right.
So the more folks show up, the more you get out of it.
Right, furthering the dialogue, and
Absolutely.
that's precisely what we were attempting to do with that recent roundtable.
Absolutely.
We had 160 people on hand to hear that message, and that was very gratifying for me to see that
Absolutely.
folks had interest in transportation. So,
I every forum I can go to talk about transportation, I want everyone that comes my way.
Right.
That's one of the things I can do is be an advocate for transportation. Not necessarily always a project, but transportation in general.
Right.
We have lots of transportation issues in the area, and the more I can push an agenda forward to help folks better understand what the needs are, the more successful I'll be in the end.
absolutely. Absolutely. I understand that there's an opportunity here coming up in a couple of weeks over in Pensacola.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, through my chairmanship of the Northwest Florida Regional TPO, we started last year having an annual transportation symposium.
Okay.
The one last year was at the conference center on the island. This year we moved over to Pensacola to the west end of our area.
Okay.
And I think next year we'll probably try to do it in Panama City. But we have a series of keynote speakers. In this case, Secretary Prasad is coming back again. We have a gentleman named Gil Peñalosa, who's the executive director of an organization called 880 Cities, Dr. Chapin from Florida State Planning and Design, and John Robert Smith from the chairman of Transportation America. We'll have 5 or 6 of our state legislators from this area, and about 8 breakout sessions on different transportation topics or economic development topics to kind of whet folks' appetite here.
Excellent.
So I think it's a great way to try to build some consensus. This year when we went to Pensacola, there's a fee to get in.
Right.
We were trying to get a grant, so we went a little big. So next year we probably may not do it that way. We're going to relook our process, but sometimes you got to pay a fee to get indoors. It's a little tough for the average person to get in.
Right.
We're a little sensitive to that. We're going to try to relook that for next year. So, but I look forward to hearing all of the things that are said by lots of smart folks. We probably got 70 or so different speakers on different topics through these
Fantastic.
roundtables and breakout sessions. A lot of good information. It's not a decision meeting, it's a communication meeting. So I look forward to what comes out of that and whether any good ideas which actually put into practice.
Wonderful.
So,
Wonderful. Now, how do folks register if they're interested in attending that?
If you want to go again to the West Florida Regional Planning
Right.
Council's homepage, as soon as you go to their landing page, you'll see an icon for the symposium. You can click on that. Registration, all that stuff is there.
Okay.
And I would say do it rather quickly. I think the deadline is tomorrow, preferably. We'll get things locked down. So
Right.
If you would, go ahead and do that, and we look forward to seeing you.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, Jim, we certainly appreciate what you do for our community, for our region, and for our state. It's been a pleasure visiting with you today, and keep up the good work and let us know how we can help you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for your invitations.
Thank you. We've been talking with Jim Wood, chairman of the Okaloosa-Walton TPO and Destin City Councilman about transportation. I'm Nathan Sparks. On behalf of the Economic Development Council, we'll see you next time.